Good evening, I'm Maciej Mikos and you're watching World News Tonight, live from Warsaw. President Donald Trump begins his second term in office by signing dozens of executive orders, including the U.S. withdrawal from the Paris Climate Agreement and World Health Organization. More on that in a moment, but first let's look at the latest headlines. Trump urges Putin to seek a peace deal in Ukraine. The U.S. withdraws from the global Paris Climate Agreement. And Slovakian opposition accuses Prime Minister Fico of planning EU exit. Donald Trump has sent a blunt message to his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin, saying Russia is being destroyed by the war in Ukraine. The 47th President of the United States has only just begun his second term, but he's already wading into the conflict that is about to enter its fourth year. Our chief political correspondent, Aaron Damon, has this report.
As one president waves goodbye to Washington, another returns to the spotlight. And fresh from taking the presidential oath, Donald Trump had a memo for Moscow.
Zelensky wants to make a deal. I don't know if Putin does. He might not. I don't know. He should make a deal. I think he's destroying Russia by not making a deal. I think Russia's going to be in big trouble.
This from the same man who promised to end the war in Ukraine on his first day in office.
I'll be meeting with President Putin.
When do you think?
I don't know. I can't. It's being set up.
Brokering lasting ceasefires in both Ukraine and the Middle East is certainly on Trump's mind, even mentioning his aspiration in Monday's inaugural address.
My proudest legacy will be that of a peacemaker and unifier. That's what I want to be, a peacemaker and a unifier.
Despite that, any peace deals are unlikely to come from a place of goodwill.
He'll want the sort of the recognition that he's managed to pull off the impossible, perhaps even a Nobel Peace Prize, something along these lines. You know, his ego needs to be satisfied.
In fact, Trump's own remarks could be read as double speak, on one hand telling Putin to stop the invasion of Ukraine, and on the other suggesting the likes of Greenland, which is an autonomous territory of Denmark, should come under American control.
So we'll see what happens. But Greenland is necessary, not for us, it's necessary for international security. You have Russian boats all over the place. You have China boats all over the place, warships.
All right, so
Marco Rubio has now been confirmed as the next US Secretary of State, with the full impact of Trump's presidency on Europe still an open question. But failing to mention NATO or other allies in his first speech to the world could be further proof of his America First game plan.
In his first term, he famously labeled the EU as a strategic foe of the United States and viewed it primarily as a competitor. And I do expect that there will be tariffs put on the EU at some point early in this administration.
An uncertain future awaits as Donald Trump walks back into the halls of power.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky traveled to Switzerland on Tuesday to participate in the World Economic Forum's annual summit in Davos. And joining us now live from Davos is our correspondent Oz Ketaji. Good evening, Oz. So what can you tell us about Zelensky's goals at this year's summit?
Well, while all eyes are on America, Zelensky's speech here in Davos was very much concentrated on European matters, European security, European energy independence. There were many themes that he touched upon in his speech towards the attendance at the summit, but this really was a very Europe-focused speech. One of the key issues, as this dispute between Slovakia's Prime Minister Robert Fico and Volodymyr Zelensky over the halting of Russian gas transit through Ukraine. Energy independence is such a key theme. So let's take a listen to what he had to say about that.
And we need to make sure no European country is dependent on a single energy supply, especially not Russia. Right now, things are on our side. President Trump is going to export more energy. But Europe needs to step up and do more long-term work to secure real energy independence.
Another key topic for Ukraine at this summit is food independence, food security. TVP World spoke exclusively to Ukraine's Minister for Agrarian Policy and Food, Vitaly Koval, earlier on Tuesday. Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
For us, agriculture is the backbone of the entire economy. Currently, 59% of our gross export revenues come from agricultural products. $24.6 billion in 2024 are the funds that came from Ukrainian agro exports. The contribution to GDP is huge. Therefore, it's important for us to expand our trade, our cooperation with other countries, and it's very important to continue to be a guarantor of food security. We are the first country in the world that, in times of war, being in a difficult situation, helps other countries.
So, while the eyes of the world are still firmly focused on America, Ukraine here with a very Europe-focused message, but another message here at Davos that Ukraine is open for business and investment. Back to you in the studio.
That was Oscar Fergi reporting from Davos, Switzerland. Thank you very much, Os. European officials are congratulating the newly inaugurated US President Donald Trump on his return to the Oval Office. While some leaders emphasize the importance of a united European-American front in the face of common threats and challenges, others are wasting no time laying out ambitious proposals. Zuzanna Jurek reports.
A flurry of congratulatory posts published on social media, all addressing the freshly inaugurated US President Donald Trump. Politicians at the heart of Europe were quick to signal their hopes for transatlantic unity and cooperation.
To be very clear, the United States is and will remain our closest ally outside of Europe, and I will do everything in my power to ensure it remains so, because it is in our mutual interest.
But for Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, Trump's reascension to the White House begets a level of uncertainty about the future of the war, which has ravaged his nation since 2022.
Well, thank you very much.
Ukrainians are ready to work together with Americans to achieve peace, real peace. This is an opportunity that must be seized.
One politician who was unsurprisingly elated at the inauguration celebrations was a long-standing Trump ally, Viktor Orban. The Hungarian PM was quick to point out what EU-US relations he hoped for under Trump's administration.
A new president in the US, a large faction of patriots in Brussels, great enthusiasm. So the great attack can start. Hereby, I launch the second phase of the offensive that aims to occupy Brussels. Go Hungary, go Hungarians.
Some's reactions ring silent. Slovakia's PM Robert Fico, a known EU dissenter, has not yet had the chance to congratulate President Trump.
There's a lot of speculation about Robert Fico inviting Donald Trump to Bratislava to be the grounds for a dialogue with Vladimir Putin. That, for the time being, remains purely speculation.
And as MEPs gathered in Strasbourg this morning to discuss the most pressing issues, Trump's inauguration took center stage.
A sense of uncertainty can be felt here on the corridors of the European Parliament in Strasbourg. Uncertainty over the future of the EU relations with the new Donald Trump administration.
Yes, we are irreplaceable partners. Drifting alone, you might reach an uninhabited island.
Today, the first thing we must demand is respect.
Meanwhile, the message delivered by the President of the European Commission served to remind the representatives gathered at the World Economic Forum in Davos what is still at stake.
The rules of engagement between global powers are changing. We should not take anything for granted. And while some in Europe may not like this new reality, we are ready to deal with it.
And as the slew of executive orders signed during Trump's first hours back in the Oval Office take effect, the world waits to see to what extent the messages of hope will materialize.
Following Donald Trump's inauguration on Monday, the 47th president utilized a powerful tool to make his mark on American policy. Just moments after his inauguration, Trump wasted no time in signing a barrage of executive orders covering everything from immigration to trade and energy. Sasha Farbach has some more in this report.
It wasn't just pomp and circumstance in Washington on Monday. Just as he promised, Donald Trump got to work right away signing executive orders which don't require the approval of Congress, though many presidents have used this tool since the early years of the United States. FDR signed over 3,000, and more recently, Ronald Reagan also penned over 380 across his 2 terms. During his first term, Donald Trump took steps to exploit America's oil and gas reserves, even at the cost of environmental damage. In the same spirit, Trump has once again announced his desire to resume unrestricted drilling.
Drill, baby, drill.
Also in the sights of President Trump, another UN agency, the World Health Organization. Trump had long sought to remove the U.S. from membership in the WHO and has now taken steps to do just that. The president blames the organization for taking too much money from the U.S., what he believes was a mishandling and cover-up of the COVID-19 pandemic. With Trump's America First policy, U.S. foreign development assistance has also been paused, subject to a review in 90 days. This could be worrying for Ukraine, as it is one of the largest recipients of foreign aid by the U.S. Although the majority of this goes to fund economic sectors, there's now an open question how this could impact future military assistance to Kyiv.
Well, I think what we stand for is going to be clear in the actions the president's taken. He's outlined it yesterday. He said that all our foreign policy is going to be about promoting peace and making America strong, prosperous, and safe. That's what our foreign policy should always be about. Our foreign policy once again needs to focus on the national interest of the United States.
Donald Trump has often stated that the U.S. is getting a bad deal, and one of his plans is to use trade tariffs to get his way and rectify the problem. Despite the potential economic consequences, Trump has also ordered a review of American manufacturing and industry to see what kind of tariffs he would like to utilize. These will likely be aimed at China, but also the European Union, causing friction in relations.
There will be stronger relationships between individual European countries and United States. And yet there will be also a lot of troubles and tensions between, let's say, the collective European Union as an actor, be it the European Union organizations and institutions, or let's say also the big European players such as France and Germany because of their political problems.
With a sweeping list of executive orders, Donald Trump also found time for social media. With his revival of TikTok for 75 days, he's hoping to sway even more young Americans towards his ambitious agenda. Sasha Farbach, TVP World.
We need to avoid a global race to the bottom, said Ursula von der Leyen, as she warned against the use of tariffs as a tool of foreign policy. Although the European Commission president did not mention Donald Trump by name, a large part of his speech at the World Economic Forum in Davos was devoted to Washington's shift in policy. Marek Steele has the story.
After a several-week-long absence due to an illness, Ursula von der Leyen is back. In Davos, the head of the European Commission announced a new roadmap for the European Union.
To sustain our growth in the next quarter of the century, Europe must shift gears. And this is why I asked Mario Draghi to deliver a report on European competitiveness. And on that basis, next week, the European Commission is presenting our roadmap, the competitiveness compass.
The new document focuses on increasing productivity by closing the innovation gap. It's a strategy to make economic growth faster and cleaner, the European Commission president said. The compass is meant to be a European answer to global threats, which von der Leyen listed in her speech.
Our supply chain dependencies are at times weaponized, as shown by Russia's energy blackmail, or exposed as brittle when global shocks, such as the pandemic, emerge without warning. And the very interconnectors that bring us together, like undersea data cable, have become targets from the Baltic Sea to the Taiwan Strait.
A large part of von der Leyen's address was devoted to new policies announced by US President Donald Trump.
It was like the first, I would say, first dialogue, first polemic with yesterday's proposals launched by the newly inaugurated President Trump.
Before taking office, Donald Trump repeatedly threatened to impose tariffs on the EU on the first day as US president, but he has not yet fulfilled his promise.
I think he will start implementing import tariffs on European goods. What he has done during his first term, I think, will repeat itself, and that is general tariffs, but also the selection of certain goods that particularly hurt one country or the other.
In Tuesday's speech, von der Leyen went on to underline the significance of the EU for the US economy.
Any trade conflict would be extremely damaging for all parties, not just to Europe, and that was like a direct response to Mr. Trump's stipulation that tariffs is a beautiful word, to quote him.
The EU's relations with China were a central element of von der Leyen's Davos speech. She warned that a second China shock could be caused by state-sponsored overcapacity.
It is important that we balance the imperative to safeguard our security against our opportunity to innovate and enhance our prosperity. In this spirit, we will need to work together to avoid a global race to the bottom.
Last year, the European Union imposed tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles because of state-sponsored subsidies, which could be harmful to European manufacturers.
The Slovakian opposition has withdrawn its no-confidence motion against Robert Fico's government, vowing to launch another at a later date. Fico responded to the motion by calling for a secret, non-public discussion of the proposal, as well as a debate on the recent report from the Slovakian Information Service. Franciszek Pilis has more.
The call to topple the government came after Prime Minister Robert Fico supported a comment by MP Tibor Gaspar, a member of the same party as Fico and the Prime Minister's security expert, saying that Slovakia should be ready to leave the EU and NATO. That, combined with Fico's visits to Moscow and his disappearances on so-called vacations, led the opposition to launch the vote, saying they don't trust the Prime Minister with their future. Fico responded with a call for a non-public discussion of the proposal, including a debate on the recent Slovakian Information Service report, which, according to Slovakian news agency TASR, alleges that the Slovakian opposition is seeking to destabilize the country as part of a long-term organized influence operation.
All 71 MPs in the opposition signed the initiative to have this session of the parliament to discuss the vote of no confidence. It was started today and proceeded then to take a very strange turn whereby Prime Minister Fico announced that he would only be willing to continue in a non-public session. This never happened in the history of Slovak parliament.
While Parliament was debating the motion to oust him, Robert Fico was busy meeting with his Hungarian counterpart and fellow Moscow sympathizer Viktor Orbán, who was visiting Bratislava at the time. The opposition aren't the only ones dissatisfied with Fico's rule. Over 250 Slovakian psychiatrists and psychologists recently wrote a letter to the PM asking him to resign, calling Fico's political behavior and public statements a threat to democracy in Slovakia.
There is a very open and public discussion about the fact that his coalition may not last until the end of the full legislative term in 2027. So nobody is ruling out possible early elections. And of course, with pressure and cracks piling up, we can expect further weakening of the government.
Despite not reaching the necessary majority to pass the proposal by just a few votes, the opposition has vowed to launch another no-confidence motion in the near future.
Donald Trump's inaugural speech sent shockwaves across the globe as the 47th US president announced major changes to American domestic and foreign policies. To discuss the future of Polish-American relations under Donald Trump, We're joined by the former Polish Prime Minister Jan Krzysztof Bielecki. Good evening.
Good evening to you.
So Donald Trump was surprisingly quiet about Europe during his speech yesterday. Now, could this mean that he's way less interested in our corner of the world than his predecessor, Joe Biden?
Well, I wouldn't say that he was that quiet, because sometimes I think that when Elon Musk says this and that, then it's also like Donald Trump would be behind him. And Elon Musk was quite engaged in European affairs recently, because he suggested to change the government in the UK. I think he asked the king to dismiss the government, and then he supported AfD as the only party to bring...
ahead of the parliamentary elections in Germany, absolutely.
Which is just running, yes, and at the full speed. And he said that this is the only hope for Europe when AfD will run the country. And so, and also gave an offer you cannot refuse to the Danish government, suggesting that they should simply give away Greenland because they need as for strategically the most important maybe island in the world. So at least you have 3 examples that they are engaged in European affairs.
Yes, that however did not happen yesterday, only a bit earlier. I'd like to ask you about Donald Trump's relations and his administration's relations with Poland. Back in 2017, when he was visiting Warsaw, he was very enthusiastic about the country. He also underlined the strength of the Polish-American alliance. Now, that was nearly 8 years ago. Could something have changed past this 8 years?
Well, I think they know that Poles are staunch supporters of United States, and we are in love with America from my early days, which is almost a century ago when I was born. So, in that sense, when he arrived to Warsaw, he really felt okay. At that time, as you remember, he was not very popular among the European leaders. Sometimes felt really surrounded by them at some official meetings like G7 or G20. So he arrived to Poland, was welcome. The president was in love with him, demonstrating it in a very eager way. So, well, I think that's why Poland was not mentioned in the early days. However, by some executive orders which were undertaken over the last 24 hours, I think that the Polish citizens could be affected. And first of all, I don't know the numbers. I think nobody knows. I've heard only about the number of Indian people which are illegally living in the United States, that it's roughly 200,000. I don't know how many of those people that kind of problem with the legal basis for they living in the United States comes from Poland, but it could be a few thousand. So the embassies are therefore ready for legal and
but do you think that if Polish citizens residing in the US were to be deported from the United States, that would, visibly strain the relations between Warsaw and Washington?
I don't think so, because I hope that the government, first of all, will provide necessary assistance. Maybe some could undertake some legal challenge to this regulation, and I don't know, claim in the court that the they have some rights to stay because they've been living there for quite some time. So I don't know how big social problem it might be, but this is an issue, definitely, and we should always look after Polish citizens. That's one problem. I think second one is regarding taxation. If US will pull out with that general agreement on taxation for large corporate, I think above $700 million of turnover, if I remember well, then of course that means that in the country of destination, which is Poland, but it's not the headquarters for the company, because Ireland is much more attractive in that sense for large US tech companies, for example. And then, of course, it could affect our tax
relations.
No, maybe not good relations, but that will have some price, and we will have to pay that.
Well, Donald Trump put a lot of emphasis on economy during his inaugural speech, and he mentioned the export of American oil and gas, if I may quote. "We will bring prices down, fill our strategic reserves up again right to the top, and export American energy all over the world." Now, how do these declarations play into Polish long-term energy security plans?
Well, I think that could have a direct impact because we hear in Europe reserves of LNG, particularly for the next year, are lower than a year ago. So the storages are, I think, 50% empty at the moment. So for the security, you need an access to LNG if we stop trading with the Soviets. So if there is more LNG on the market, then the price will go down. So that could be, to some extent, some compensation to some other costs triggered by Donald Trump executive orders. And of course, that brings us to the custom issue and new tariffs expected to be imposed on European export to the United States. And it could be a serious issue for Europe. I think Europe has a significant surplus monthly, 15 billion, if I'm okay. So that then you can imagine if that means that your profit or your net revenue is decreased.
And Donald Trump would obviously like to reverse the trend. That's what he has vowed during his presidential campaign. Now, you already mentioned, Mr. Prime Minister, Elon Musk's influence over Europe. And, so far he seems rather uninterested in Poland, but the presidential elections are yet to come. Now, if he was to meddle in Polish presidential elections, would that be a big problem for Warsaw?
Well, if he could meddle, as you said, in Trumpism way or Trump economics, then I would be even happier because that means that he will speak very much against the previous policy of government of Morawiecki, which was like a socialist government, and Elon Musk is definitely against socialism, strongly for the private property, strongly believes in any privatization or to privatize whatever you like, and rather also would like to have people rich and happy, which also I think could be a good lesson for some politician in Poland, the incumbent opposition, I mean. So some objectives of Trump's economy that could be, I think, good for Poland, because over the last 10, 15 years, we a little bit forgot about very successful market reforms we introduced to the country. And now we are much more focused on distribution. When Donald Trump tries to rebuild the wealth of the nation, and the wealth is built by investment, by hard work, and also by good regulation and limited. So good for Poland.
Let's then conclude the conversation on this optimistic note. Former Polish Prime Minister Jan Krzysztof Bielecki was our guest this evening. It was a pleasure.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And thank you for watching, and stay with us for much more news and features here on TVP World.